It's from Roelof van den Broek, from his work entitled Gnosticism. He explains that the Gnostic religion is understood as a phenomenon that flourished in the great myths of the 2nd and 3rd century, which spread across the Middle East and Roman Empire, up to the Far East. Van den Broek enumerates 4 typical features of Gnosticism. 1. A distinction is made between the highest, unknown God and the imperfect or plainly evil Creator God, who is often identified with the God of the Bible. 2. This is often connected with an extensive description of the divine world, or pleroma, from which the essential core of human beings derives, and of a disastrous fall of a divine being, Sophia or wisdom, in this upper world. 3. As a result, humankind has become entrapped in the earthly condition of oblivion and death, from which it is saved by the revelation of Gnosis by one or more heavenly messengers. 4. Salvation is often actualized and celebrated in rituals that are performed within the Gnostic community. Or we can take the simple definition of Andrew Philip Smith from his book, John the Baptist and the Gnostics. It goes, stuff like what the ancient Gnostics used to do. I should mention that an important component of Gnosticism, and certainly Gnosis, is gratitude. And you can certainly find it aplenty in the Nag Hammadi library and Hermetic texts, in many hymns and prayers, even in the surliest Sethian gospel. The truth of this universe is horror, but this also comes with awe, for there is a knowledge of higher realities, and that something can be done to rescue the light from the darkness of mere being. There's no reason one can't hold awe and horror at the same time in one's mind, and they're probably overlapping feelings when you think about it. Let us end with the prayer of thanksgiving from the Nag Hammadi library. We give thanks to you. Every soul and heart is lifted up to you. Undisturbed name, honored with the name, quote, God, and praised with the name, quote, Father. For to everyone and everything comes the fatherly kindness and affection of love, and any teaching there may be that is sweet and plain, giving us mind, speech, and knowledge. Mind, so that we may understand you. Speech, so that we may expound you. Knowledge, so that we may know you. We rejoice, having been illuminated by your knowledge. We rejoice because you have shown us yourself. We rejoice because while we are in the body, you have made us divine through your knowledge. Awesome. Well, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to AB Live on this, I don't want to say holiday special, but more like a holiday intervention. It is a special show because, as I've said recently, these are some dark times. These are some times of stress with the lockdown, the pandemic, the holidays are already hard, the uncertainty of the ending of this year and the starting of the next year. So I thought we would do a panel to provide all those tools and to get acquainted with some psychological and Jungian tools. And despite my dark tone, this is actually always a time of celebration because meeting your shadow, your ego, and all that is always a good thing when you think about it. So with us, it is a pleasure to have once again back Rachel Conerly. How are you doing, Rachel?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Great to have you back. And as we talked, you are in a barn. Are you looking over Mary and Joseph as we speak?
Kind of. I'm looking over a beautiful meadow. There is a barn in it. I'm in the old-timey country store next to my house, which is being renovated.
Awesome. Well, it looks like a great place to be, and love the candle. And with us, too, we have the pleasure of being joined by Tim Kelley, author of True Purpose, 12 strategies for discovering the difference you are meant to make. Tim, thank you very much for coming on AM Byte. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I brought a candle too, so didn't want to be left out.
Like a candle in the wind. Awesome. And of course, as always, we've got the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine here. My mangy manger. Looking forward to finding out how my Christmas complexes will be resolved.
Yeah, that's going to happen. Awesome. And for the audience, I see people are already rolling into the comments, into the chat rooms of YouTube and Facebook. As always and forever, if you have any questions, please type lots of question marks at the end or put them in all caps so that Vance or myself can get to them. Perhaps who you're addressing, if you're addressing Tim or Rachel, let us know so we can get to them. And feel free if you need to express anything or you're dealing with a certain issue, let us know. We will definitely do our best. I know I always need as much tools as possible in the old toolbox, and I can't have enough good gnosis, as I like to say. So I guess to start out with, probably Tim, could you tell the audience, well, again, Rachel was with us a few months ago, so I think many know about her from the interview. It was a great interview, but
They
Tim,
might have missed it though. They might need a little reminder.
all right. Well, how about that reminder? I'm completely sober. I don't drink. This is my natural fumbling over myself. Rachel, tell us a little bit about yourself to Tim and everybody else.
Well, I just recently moved to the most northwestern corner of North Carolina. So I'm in the high country, and that's pretty chilly right now. And as I said, my house is being renovated. I'm a coach and a consultant, and I teach something called the Collaborative Operating System. And when I was with Miguel and Moondog, October 20th, and it was episode 489, we talked about complexes, which are one of the most underutilized, perhaps, but most potent aspects of Jung's psychology. Is that good?
Works for me. Does
All
it work
right.
for everybody else? All right, awesome. All right, Tim, it's your turn now.
Yeah, sure. So I would say if people, I don't like to use titles much, but if people press me, I say, okay, if you want a title, I'm a global change agent. That's my job title. So busy trying to upgrade human society, create a new world, bring heaven on earth, that sort of thing. And the way I do that is, so I've trained a lot of consultants and coaches in how to find people's and organizations' purpose, several thousand folks. Worked with, I don't know, a couple hundred companies, I'm not really sure at this point, on their higher purpose, and also 2 countries so far, and hope to do more of that work. And I work with CEOs and politicians and other leaders who are trying to change the world and help them evolve into better change agents. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Well, the question I see, and for some reason I want to jump on it right there to you, Tim. And as somebody just asked, what is my purpose? And it may
yes,
seem
I
like a
noticed
loaded
that right away. Papersock is going right for the gusto.
But I'd say,
Do
why
not
not?
pass go? Do not collect 200. Just go for it. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, in life, that should be everybody's first question before you decide what college, who you're going to date, who's your favorite football team. Just come out of the womb and say, what's my purpose?
There you go.
First question before you. So what would you say? How do people find their purpose, Tim?
Yeah, I unfortunately, Papersock, I don't know you well enough to just rattle your purpose off the top of my head. That would take a little longer. But actually, I've only ever told someone their purpose, like your purpose is X, maybe twice. I don't generally consider that to be a good process. Rachel would concur. Rachel knows a good process when she sees one. So I was trained a lot in good process by Rachel. So better process is to help people find their own purpose, right? So teach a woman to fish and that sort of thing. So there are different ways of doing it. So the ways most people try, I would say, is either ask and wait. Gee, I wonder what my purpose is. Crickets, right? Or Trial and error. That's the other big fan favorite is try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let me try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let me try this. The problem with both of those is they're really inefficient. They can take a really long time and don't necessarily result in an answer. So in terms of real methodology, there's kind of two ways of doing it. If you don't get lucky and find it by accident, one way is to play connect the dots. And so if you hire a coach or read a book or take a workshop, usually what they'll do is they say, well, if you had a year to live, what would you do? Or if you won the lottery, what would you do? Or what's the things that you've done in your life that have made you the most passionate and fulfilled, or stuff like that. And you take the answers to that and you sort of play connect the dots and look for patterns in those responses. And those patterns can sort of ballpark your purpose. That's the most common way of doing it. My preferred method, which will fit really well with a Jungian Gnostic kind of audience, is to go probing around in the unconscious looking for it. Because if the idea is, well, I have a purpose and I don't know what it is, so I'm looking for it, that meets the definition of unconscious, right? It's true about me, but I don't know it, therefore it's unconscious. So then that implies that the right place to look is in the unconscious. So rather than thinking about it, which is the conscious mind trying to answer the question up above the line, it's like, well, let's go under the line and go looking for the information. And the way I teach people to do that is things like guided visualization, for example, or active imagination, where you're actually trying to interact with something that lives in the unconscious that does have access to the purpose, and ask it, okay, you're down there with the purpose, tell me, what is it? And then if it works, it tells you. It's like, oh, well, glad you asked, it's this, and now you know. So that's my preferred technique. The problem, of course, is that it requires certain conditions to be set up to be able to poke around in the unconscious. But once you get those conditions set up, then it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, it reminds me of we were having a conversation last night at a meeting with Vance, and I offered this exercise from the Gestalt theory where if you have a bad dream or a fantasy or a vision, you get two chairs and you sit on one chair and you are you, and then you sit on the other chair and you play the role of this shadow evil figure in your dreams.
The dream symbol, whatever it was.
Yeah. Yep. And I think the key is once you give voice to your unconscious, because your unconscious is always talking and has the end. Once you give it a voice, the ego will listen. Isn't that pretty much it? And that's
once the ego gets over his fear of asking the question in the first place, yeah.
It takes a lot of pain in my life. It's like, oh, I can't handle the
pain.
Oh,
all right. If you insist, I'll go looking.
Yeah. And Rachel, so what would you say about this? Or also, I've been quoting you and your ideas on depression and suicide. I've said it in any show. So feel free to speak to this or speak about how some methods individuals can find their purpose. And of course, that should alleviate a lot of, depression and anxiety, even though depression and anxiety are just part of being human.
Yeah, well, the thing I say about purpose, this body of work that Tim's created, is that it's a great organizing principle for your life because it helps you define the journey and it helps you make the journey explicit, sufficiently explicit that you can really get engaged, get some traction in it. And, for me, kind of tagging back to the episode we did on complexes, I would say this is the ultimate break with external authority, because you are leaving and going inward and deciding for yourself what your job is going to be. You stop planning your job around your purpose and your purpose around your job, and you do it the other way. Everything gets wrapped according to what your purpose is. So I guess that's what I would say at this juncture.
Yeah, and I felt kind of unmoored for much of my life until I found my purpose. And personally, it's not true of everyone, but it's definitely true of me. If I don't know why I'm doing something, I'm way less effective. It's sort of a character defect. So I had to find my purpose in order to really be fully effective.
Awesome. And by purpose, how would you define purpose? I mean,
yeah, so there's different definitions. So if you look in a dictionary, it'll say something like an aim or goal, which is fine. I mean, it's like a small p purpose. So you could ask, like, what's the purpose of this meeting? Or what's the purpose of being on this podcast, or something like that? Or what was your purpose in coming here today? That's a perfectly valid question. That's a very kind of small scale purpose. And the system that Rachel trained me in, the collaborative operating system, you ask that about everything. Right? What's the purpose of this role? What's the purpose of this team? What's the purpose of this company? What's the purpose of the meeting? Don't do anything until you have a purpose lined up, right? And that's a really good best practice in life in general. In this context, though, when PaperSock asks, "What's my purpose?" Now we're talking about the purpose of a person, right, or the purpose of a company, or something like that, or the purpose of a country. Now you're dealing with same concept roughly, but on a much bigger scale. And so to me, they're equivalent. It's just a question of what scale you're operating on. And the way I would define it, and as a mathematician by training, that's like actually very important to me to define things well, is purpose is the answer to the question, why? So why are we here? What's our purpose in being here? Why am I here? What's the purpose of my life, right? So when PaperSock is asking, what is my purpose? Another way of saying it is PaperSock is asking, why am I here? Why am I incarnated in this body on this planet doing all this stuff? What's that about, right? And you can treat that as an imponderable, but I prefer to treat it as a ponderable. Like I think it's better to come up with a specific answer to the question. And then, like Rachel said, use that answer as a navigational tool in life to say, well, is this job or this job more purposeful? Is going left or right more purposeful? And you don't always have to do the most purposeful thing. There might be good reasons to do a less purposeful thing, but it sure does help to ask the question and to pay attention and to use it as a criterion in making key decisions.
Awesome. Yeah, and I always wonder because you have somebody like Joseph Campbell, who was obviously a Jungian, and when Bill Maher asked him, "Well, what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life?" He's like, "Well, what's the purpose of a flea? It only is." He leaned right into his Hindu, his
Mm-hmm.
Eastern, his other
Mm-hmm.
passion.
Right.
But I would disagree. I mean, I would agree and disagree. I say each one of us, as an avatar, has a role to play in the karmic world, regardless of how meaningless or how depressed or how low. I tell people the greatest trick the devil ever said was telling you have no purpose of meaning. We all have
Mm-hmm.
one, and
Right.
it's a valuable and important one.
Yeah. Now, you may not know what it is. You can choose not to find it. And having found it, you can choose not to follow it. Like having a purpose doesn't compromise free will. However, smart money says if you do find it and you do follow it, likely you'll get good results from that. Unless you do it in a really stupid way, it's going to make you more fulfilled. Actually, they've done a lot of research. People who have a purpose and follow a purpose feel more fulfilled. They're generally more successful, earn more money, live longer. They're more resistant to certain diseases, including heart disease and Alzheimer's disease, and they have better sex. So if you could bottle it and sell it as a vitamin, you could make billions of dollars, right? So the good news is it's free, right? No one can keep it from you or give it to you. It's yours.
It's interesting that you brought up the Joseph Campbell, because I was just thinking that there's a strong relationship between, I think, Tim's purpose work and engaging the hero's journey. And I would like to hear you say a few words about that, and I'll chime in with a few of my own if I don't.
You being me?
You.
Well, think of it as a tool for the journey, right? So the young hero has to, gird and equip himself when he goes out to face the world. And so if life is a path, right? If this is a path, a journey, and we're trying to navigate the trials and tribulations, right? Especially if you're viewing it through a Gnostic lens, right? Then there's a lot of challenge to be faced.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose is essential equipment for the road. You're actually equipping yourself with a very powerful tool, maybe even a weapon, depending on how you look at things, that's going to help you face the challenges that you're going to face, and more importantly, find your way, right? This going through the dark forest or something and potentially getting lost and, eaten by a dragon or whatever. So its purpose is very much like a compass or a GPS device. At every turn, it can tell you which way to go. And that's super useful, especially in a very practical sense, in an increasingly chaotic and confusing and rapidly changing world, where predicting the future becomes a joke. Having a compass that can tell you which way to go is increasingly valuable.
What do you think, Rachel? Anything to say on this?
Well, yeah, I love what Tim said. And it gave me a real sense that there were going to be these threshold crossings over and over again. And I might as well get used to it. I mean, to engage a life of purpose is to say yes to the journey and be willing to leave your place of comfort and to go again and to go again, It's a life of adventure. It's the ultimate adventure, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see a question here that might be relevant to this. First, a random question, which is Benjamin wants to know, do you guys welcome random questions? Yes, but no guarantee we'll answer them. And then the other one, please speak about the programmed fears that we all get in childhood that prevent our growth. I think that's relevant because that's some of the brambles along the path that we have to face when we're traveling, and particularly this sort of latter half of life thing where you're going back and picking up the stuff that you dropped along the path on the first half. There's this sort of return back through the trials and tribulations of childhood that happens in the individuation process. And so, not only do we accumulate fears, we accumulate wounds and beliefs and create parts. And there's all this stuff that gets accumulated early in life that then part of the hero's journey is to go back and face that. Like it really in the individuation process, the real dragons are inside. They're not outside. They're internal. The external stuff that looks scary is just out projections of the internal stuff that's scary. And if you can face the internal dragon, the external one just turns into a paper dragon and folds up and goes away. So as I understand it, and this is kind of running sort of into a psychological version of the hero's journey, that, that we get one or more core wounds when we're young, hopefully, if everything works properly, and then develop all this shielding and all these strategies and all these defenses and fears and beliefs and stuff in response to that, the complexes that Rachel was talking about a couple months ago. And then at some point in life where we're struggling, so go, hey, wait a minute. I'm the problem here, right? I'm the one creating all the noise and the Sturm und Drang. It's not out there. It looks like it's out there, but that's a trick. Like it's like the Wizard of Oz. It's like, no. It's not this big booming thing over there. It's this dude behind the curtain over here. And then, now I have to go back and say, okay, well, how did I create all of that? What were the parts and the beliefs and what were the emotions I suppressed and the patterns I developed in response to whatever those childhood events were that were so unacceptable to me that they forced me to develop an ego, right? What meaning do I make of all of that? And that's the dragons that you're facing along the path, not the external stuff. The external stuff is just noise.
Well, thank you, and good question and good answer. I wanted to
actually, let me say one last thing, and those don't prevent growth. Those are the growth, right? Facing that stuff is the growth. To Rodolph's question.
Exactly, and well said. For you, Rachel, I was thinking the other day, my wife is always trying to quit smoking, and I love to smoke. I would smoke in my sleep. Ask Vance, I would smoke in my sleep if I had if I was allowed to, if my unconscious would let this go. But she's, she makes it a few hours. She's like, God damn it. When I was 21, I could quit for 7 days, 30 days. And I want to tell her something like, well, that's because the younger we are, the more we can switch out our complexes. Children reinvent themselves. And that Jungian stuff doesn't go very well, but I think it's true, isn't it? I mean, as children, we could reinvent ourselves. And that, am I right saying it's because children are just a bundle of complexes? So in a way, as we get older, should we continue to try reinventing ourselves, switching out those complexes, or what do you think?
Well, I said it's all about integrating them so that we're not living from the complex, so that we have them, they don't have us. And you think your wife smoking is a complex? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think her ego has solidified, and that's how it is, I think. And when she's smoking, I tell her, well, you see, because I tend to be who I am. I said, you have to kill yourself. She said, what do you mean? I said, oh, sorry, kill your worldview, kill your ego, and allow another complex to come in. In other words, it is the alchemical Negretto and the death and resurrection if we want to overcome really any addiction.
Right. Well, thinking about purpose, this is a little bit tangential, but, it seems to me that it compels us to do the thing that we must do to save ourselves and save our mind. And that is to ensure that we are being guided from within instead of guided from without. And I think, though, purpose, this whole kind of organizing system, principle for life that Tim's created, does take the voices and bring them in, rather than whatever's the complex is chirping in our ear. So, how would you, Tim, do you have any connections to complexes and purpose and...
Yeah. So, and someone asked in the chat about, but by the way, there's a lively debate going on about war in the chat that I find fascinating, but I'm not going to weigh in. So they're having a high old time.
The internet, you have to be right, Tim. You have to be right on the internet.
Now that complex, I have unwound that one. And that you nailed it. That's exactly right. That was thank you for that. We'll use myself as an example. So my dad was very critical when I was young. Whenever I'd make a mistake, he'd point it out immediately and jump in my shit, right? So I was thinking about this. I didn't like it at all, right? That the thing that creates the complex is this unacceptable emotional feeling that the child is having. Like, this sucks. I'm not willing to feel this, the young child says, whatever it is. Mom abandoning you in the crib, or dad leaving, or the birth of a younger sibling. I mean, wounds come in all sorts of forms, right? And so now it's like, oh, this sucks. Yeah. So I'm feeling this criticism from my dad, and like not willing to, if this is a game, I'm not willing to play, right? So I'm thinking, what do I do about this? So the child has to come up with a solution to this. And I actually spoke it out loud. We were driving on the car on vacation. I've been thinking for a long time about this problem. And I announced to my family, I'm 6 years old. I say, Dad, I'm going to learn everything there is to know, and then you won't be able to criticize me anymore. And no one said anything. They were like, what do you
will be God
to the kid? Like, that's nice here, right? So as Rachel can affirm, that resulted in a complex where I always had to be right. And so I started memorizing stuff. And Rachel can tell you, like, you can take me out to dinner and ask me a question about just about anything. And then you have to decide how long you want to let me go before you hit the pause button. Right? Am I telling truth, Rachel? Is this true?
It's true.
Right. And that's because I always had to be right. Just as you said, Miguel, it was very insightful of you. Good intuition. So then I spend my life trying to be right, which is very annoying to the people around me, as I'm constantly trying to answer every question that's asked before anyone else gets a chance to, raising my hand in class, all this kind of stuff. It's just, creates a whole set of behaviors that are kind of like, but I'm doing that because that's going to save me, right? So now, how do I unwind that? And this is where we're getting to that question of how do I go in? What do I do? And so one of the people in the chat talked about feeling emotions. That's part of it. If I could feel the underlying sense of shame and inadequacy that I was feeling when my dad was criticizing me and tolerate it, then I don't have to engage in that behavior. I don't have to defend myself. I can just sit there and go, wow, that I feel a lot of inadequacy and shame. Boy, that sucks. But whatever, tomorrow will be a new day and I'll be fine. Right. But the whole psyche's designed to avoid this feeling at all costs. Right. So you have to like really school yourself to sit still and feel it. And the psyche will do anything it can to distract you away from that. Oh, look at that shiny object over there. Oh no, there's a right. Oh, your phone's ringing, right? Because it wants to do anything other than that. But if you can school yourself to do that, that's one path, one strategy for unwinding the complex. Another strategy for it is going in and talking to the parts that got created when this happened, right? So you mentioned Gestalt earlier. That's one way. Voice dialogue, psychosynthesis, internal family systems therapy. There's all these different schools, NLP parts work, for going in and talking to the constituent subpersonalities that are acting out the play internally. And so in there are various defensive voices, the one that's going to memorize everything, the one that's going to be in control, these ones who are tasked with implementing the strategy. And underneath and behind them, the one behind the curtain is the wounded child. This is the one who was having the sucky experience and now went into the unconscious with all these unpleasant feelings. So I could go on about my business and convince myself that everything was fine. Right? And so if I can befriend all of those parts and help them express themselves, maybe modify their job descriptions a little bit, make them all conscious, there's kind of things you can do with these parts that then has them not feel so compulsive about following the instructions they were given when I was 6. And then the third leg of this, which I learned from a colleague of mine, Jeffrey Van Dyke, very cool guy that Rachel knows, that in addition to the emotions and the parts, there's also a belief in there, a belief I created about myself to justify why it was happening to me. So the child always blames themselves for the wound. They can't afford to blame the parents because they're the source of survival, right? That's you can't throw the parents under the bus, right? You got to blame yourself. So the belief I created was I'm a stupid, worthless failure, right? And that's why my dad is criticizing me. Then the complex devotes itself to disproving the belief and suppressing the emotions. But the belief is at the heart of it. So it's like a gerbil wheel. You can't ever, that's the way complex, they just keep reifying themselves, right? And so if I can undo that belief, that also causes the whole complex to fall apart. So now I can joke and laugh and say, I have no idea, ha ha ha, which I couldn't have said before I unwound that complex, right? So those are different ways of going in and kind of like they're different lenses through which you can view the complex, through the emotion lens or the parts lens or the memory lens or the belief lens, and kind of unhook and unwind pieces of it. And if you do a good job of unhooking it, it sort of falls apart and then your ego kind of goes bleh and collapses, which is a good thing, right? And it's not so compulsive anymore.
So when you used to see that saying where Socrates went to the temple of Delphi, he was the wisest man because he knew nothing. Tim would be like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Not me. No. I know everything.
Socrates has got it right.
Socrates
I know
missed
even
the boat.
less than Socrates. I'm gonna one up Socrates if I can. That's so strong. That's really great advice.
That would have been one of those things where the robot starts to go, does not compute, and smoke starts coming out.
Yeah, the matrix falls apart. Vance, do you have a comment or any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, we had a couple of questions. Let's see. This is a good one too, and I'm dealing with this with my son. How do we encourage our young people in the age of COVID to seek their purpose, since they're bombarded so much these days, and limited too? All the schools shutting down and social interactions. This last part is my own commentary, but who has some thoughts on that?
Well, I'll just say that that a lot of young people are more focused on purpose than my generation was at their age. And so, like the millennials, for example, the Gen Ys, they will often evaluate their first job in light of whether they feel it aligns with their purpose and their values or not. So I was just talking with a guy from Florida yesterday. He's active in local politics. I saw him presenting on the 50th anniversary of the March on Selma, Alabama, and really smart young kid. And I was talking to him about purpose and this kind of stuff. He goes, "Yeah," he says, "that stuff's really important to me. I was just in a job interview the other day, and I asked the company why they do what they do, and they couldn't really answer the question. And so I said, well, what are we doing here? Why are we having this conversation?" And I left the interview. I'm like, well, that's a bold move. And I've seen that in statistics about millennials, that they'll just, and I've heard anecdotal versions of it too. Well, they're not afraid to just quit a job and go move into their parents' basement. It doesn't bother them that much. I wouldn't have done it. No way, but they don't mind. And so they're constantly evaluating not just where they work, but also where they spend their money in terms of, does that align with my purpose and my values or not? Do I want to support this organization and its goals with my expertise and work or with my customer money? No, I don't like this organization. I'm going to go do this other one. And when they find one they do like, they advertise for it. They promote it, and they go on social media and brag about it. And they'll buy the T-shirt and wear the brand. So there seems to be a lot of that going on already. And they will spend more money on a product with social benefit in order to have the right thing. So that seems to be naturally happening already, which is a good thing because there's so much distraction going on now. Rachel, your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with all that. My big focus right now, my purpose, I think, is kind of climbing up a level. And so what I'm really interested in these days is being self-directed, exercising will, tackling negative voices, or we call it self-talk. And this purpose work has helped me do that mightily. I think it could be useful to young people in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some risk of interfering with ego formation, doing purpose work too young, I think. That there's a certain amount of bumping and grinding and wounding and falling down and getting up again that happens in the teenage years and the 20s that's really necessary to develop a functional ego. And ego gets a real bad rap in a lot of circles, and I think unfairly so. And if you want to go on the hero's journey, ego is also essential equipment for the road.
It's our interface to the world, right?
Exactly. And so you don't want to compromise the development of the ego. Now, once it's developed, right, the kind of people who would attend a call like this would then all be into modifying it and tweaking it and doing stuff with it. That's fine. That's like renovating your house or an art project or souping up your car or something. Like, of course you want to change it and improve it. That's fine. But that doesn't mean that having one is fundamentally a problem. So it's important. So I know way too much about this kind of child development stuff. And my wife does too. She also teaches consciousness workshops. So my poor kid, we're like, okay, we got to be careful. We just have to we're just parents, right? We're just doing our thing. We're feeding the kid. We're sending the kid to school. We're not like, muck with his psyche while it's growing. And I gave myself permission to do a little bit. So my son holds the world record in terms of age and speed for finding his purpose using the true purpose methodology. Found it at 14. He's got it. There's a tie for age. There was another 14-year-old boy who did it as well. And for speed, it's 12 minutes. And I don't know that record's ever going to get broken. It usually takes weeks. And so he knew his purpose from age 14, but he's kind of just sort of set it aside and gone back to doing stuff. And I'm like, no problem. And the other thing I taught him fairly young, like 8 or 10 years old, was how to do parts work. And he's really good at it. So he'll have an issue at school or something. And I say, well, did you check with your parts about that? And he goes, oh, good idea. Hang on. Well, there were two parts that I had an issue with that, and I worked a deal out with one, and I'm like, what? That was 5 seconds. But he's really good at it because we were doing voice dialogue when he was like 8. So I've never seen anyone who can do it as quickly and as well as he can. So that's the tools I gave him that aren't part of the standard toolkit. But the purpose thing, I think for most people, it's really kind of irrelevant before about 25. I don't know that it's really helpful before that. And really the person has to be the judge of when they're interested enough to be ready, right?
Cool. Anybody else, Vance? Or I have some questions.
I had one question myself. Although let's see, we had at least 2 other questions on board here. It seems to me, and you guys could disagree, that these days, if you listen to the media and what, the channels that society has to most people, they're telling us that society is harmful. The progress of society is harmful. We're polluting, we're using too much energy, this and that, we're not sustainable, da, 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 da. And, I hear very little in terms of positive, like, well, let's progress and develop better technologies or whatever. It's all almost aimed at cutting everything back. And I think that's probably one of the problems our young people face because, well, let's see, I want to be an engineer. No, that's no good because the engineers are building machines that are polluting everything and it's not sustainable and we're using too much energy. I'm exaggerating maybe, but that's kind of the feeling that I get having, lived through a time where we weren't suffering under that so much. So what do we tell our young people and ourselves for that matter, in a world that seems to be sorry for itself, apologizing for the development of society? What do we do, in that scenario?
Mm-hmm. Rachel, you want to, or shall I?
You go.
Okay. So I have 2 responses to that. One is that I think there's natural negativity bias in the brain that has us see the downside of things first. And so when we're looking at society, we tend to see what's not working. It's the squeaky wheel thing, right? There's 4 wheels. This one's squeaky. We notice the squeaky one. Uh-oh, there's a wheel problem. Well, there's only a wheel problem with 25% of the wheels, but all of our attention is on the one that's making the noise. So we naturally see the features of society that we don't like and would like to change. So that's one answer. Actually, I realized I have 3 answers. So if you read, there's a book called Peter Diamandis, I think his name is, called The Future is Better Than You Think. And it's basically full of statistics showing how things are getting extremely better every year, steeply, like majorly better. And showing increases in literacy, increases in healthcare, increases in all sorts of, and it's not a straight line. It's like the stock market, goes up like this, but huge improvements in short periods of time continually in society, but invisible to us because we're focused on the stuff we don't like and the stuff that's not working. So that's one thing. The second thing is in terms of spiral dynamics. I don't know if folks are familiar with that, but this is like a system of looking at kind of different levels of collective consciousness, and it's sort of tracking the evolution of human consciousness from sort of tribal magical thinking to hierarchies to this different stuff. And so the progressive left right now is at what's called the green level. And it's the last level on the first tier, which is where you're still doing good, bad, right, wrong, like that. When you get to the second tier, you kind of graduate out of that into yellow, which would be like the collaborative operating system that Rachel created, where it's systems thinking. But the green folks on the progressive left, it's naturally about deciding what's wrong and whose fault it is. And so if you look at how progressives speak, it's all in that frame. Watch Michael Moore's movies. It's a great expression of this worldview. So it's like the 99% good, 1% bad. Indigenous and ethnic good, white males bad. And you just get all this right, wrong, good, bad stuff. Everything's categorized that way. And that naturally creates a lot of conflict. And the implied process of change is let's all agree on what's wrong and whose fault it is as step one. The problem is there's no step 2 in that process, because you'll never get beyond that diametrically opposed conflict of blame. So in order to actually make things change, you have to get above that into the systems thinking, where you're treating everyone as part of the solution instead of half of the world is good and half of the world is bad. And that's hard to do, right? The natural tendency is to want to see the other as being at fault. All you have to do is think about your friends who are getting divorced, and they both have a really good story about why it's all the other one's fault. And they're both right. I mean, that's basically how society's working right now, right? So that's the second thing. The third thing for people who really want to change the world is the thing you feel most passionate out there that's broken and wrong and needs fixing is an out projection of something in your own unconscious that you desperately want to fix and heal. Like those poor persecuted whales, somewhere in your psyche, there's some symbolic whale thing that's being hunted, and you need to go,
Your inner whale.
your inner whale. You need to go deal with your inner whale and save it, and then you'll be in a better position to go deal with the actual whales. Right? So,
You know, my thinking is that kids, more than anything, need a cogent, coherent worldview. You know, to the degree we can impart something like that, I think we can do them a lot of good. And purpose is a contender for cogent, coherent worldview. Very engaging one. That's my thought.
I would say
yeah,
so too.
and you know, we're meaning makers, right? We need narratives. We need a positive narrative about what the world is and how to engage with it. And I like to use the change agent narrative, right? Which is that there's a project going on of upgrading society or creating the new paradigm or a world that works for everyone or heaven on earth or whatever you want to call it. And do you want to be on the project team? And that frame invites people to be their best selves and to try to find a way to contribute to the positive evolution of society, which is not only good for society, it's good for them as individuals to perceive themselves as being part of such a project. That's a psychologically healthy way to engage with the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well said. I had a question for the
Thanks.
both of you. When both of you have worked with companies, and you obviously see companies as organism, egregores, a bunch of complexes, not the traditional living, breathing energies, and you both heal this psyche, because obviously we all know from the real world and Dilbert and all how dysfunctional most companies are and how much therapy and relief. But what is your take on the way governments have reacted this year? Because obviously you see this is new. I'm sure some politicians are taking advantage, but others, they're just trying to do the best they can and give orders to their towns and cities and try to talk to their citizens as adults, although it doesn't come across they're talking to their citizens as adults.
The citizens don't always respond like adults.
No, of course not. Just like at work when they give an order, there's a rebellion.
Right.
So what would you say, Tim? How would you say our leaders and politicians could act better or more functional in this grand psyche of 2020, this egregore that we've created with the virus?
Yeah, well, I think Rachel and I agree where companies are concerned, but disagree where governments and such are concerned. I think she has a different perspective than I do, but I'll leave that to her.
So you're saying that a government and a business are completely different entities?
No. I actually see them much the same. And so, in response to your question, so let's take the U.S. specifically, in part because we've had the most polarized and dysfunctional response to the COVID and all this stuff compared to other countries, including places like Uganda. I mean, not just other developed countries. We're doing worse than a lot of undeveloped countries. Some years ago, there's a guy named Richard Barrett who created a values system, cultural transformation tools or something like that, which is a way of measuring the values of an individual or a collective. Collective could be a team, a company, a country, whatever. And so two of the countries they measured were Iceland and the US. And one of the things they met you, one of the statistics you can get out of this is a very rich statistical thing when you do this. And so you do a random sample and all this kind of stuff, right? So you get some good numbers back. One of the things they measure is something called cultural entropy. And cultural entropy is the percentage of the values driving the system that are based on fear. And high cultural entropy is bad. And Iceland was something like, I don't know, 43% or something like that, which is anything above 25% is really dangerous. And so they interviewed him on Icelandic television and said, so what does that mean if we have a cultural entropy of 43%? I said, well, if it were a company, I would say you're about to go out of business. You're about to go bankrupt. And 3 weeks later, Iceland went bankrupt. So good prediction on Richard's part. Roughly the same time, within a few years, they measured the US cultural entropy, and it was something like 51%, something insanely high, dangerously high. And I knew this, and I thought, the US can't really go bankrupt in the same way that Iceland can. The way our economy works, it's just not really possible. The economy's got too much momentum. It's too big. Too much of the world has money invested in the US. We can't really quickly turn around and tank our economy that way. So, but something has to happen based on, like, what's the train wreck going to look like? And this is it. This is the train wreck. It's where we get so polarized internally between take two sides, just divide all the way apart, two completely different non-intersecting narratives about what the truth is and what's going on, and then gird for battle. And I've had friends of mine who talk about buying guns and preparing for the coming civil war, people who seem to me to be rational, sane, calm individuals. And I'm like, wow, this narrative is powerful if my friends are being convinced that there's going to be shooting and blood in the streets, right? And I don't think it's going to happen, but the fact that that many people could be convinced that it is about to happen, to me, is remarkable. And a sign that we are operating to a very high degree, dangerously high degree, from fear-based values in this country specifically.
Yeah, I mean, my explanation is, and I've talked about it before, is, and other Jungians have agreed, is that this is the age of Hermes, and the archetype of Hermes has taken over this country. It's always been here, the founding fathers and Hermeticism, Rosicrucians with the Native Americans and the Coyote, but somehow it's been just completely weaponized. So we are ruled by the trickster, for better or worse. But that's sort of my Jungian take. And what about you, Rachel? What's your take?
Well, I was thinking, your question was, what could our leaders do better? And first of all, they're not my leaders. Just want to say that. But, they could understand their individual purpose. They could seek to understand the purpose of this country. Western civilization is unique, and we have a purpose that has something to do with our Western civilization. Our culture is unique, and understanding history and all of this, just folding it into some kind of magnificent visionary purpose that we're all on this journey, and this is what we're doing here in the US, and this is the part we play in the world.
Maybe we lost our purpose like in the 50s or something. We used to have one, actually. Right. We're one of few countries that really had a purpose.
That's right.
What do you think happened?
It became individualized. So there used to be much more civic society in the US, where people were part of clubs and groups and organizations that were trying to advance different causes and stuff like that. And after the 60s, it became very much about the individual, which I think is part of the overall healthy evolution of society. But it as a way station, it created a lot of problems. And so this is where you got, the greed of the 80s and the leverage buyouts and all this, and the laissez-faire view of economics as being only existing to create profit for shareholders and not needing to provide any service to society beyond that. And all these ideas, which were not present in the 40s and 50s. There was much more of a sense of civic responsibility, national purpose, and individual responsibility to contribute to the community or society in some meaningful way. And that stuff got thrown under the bus as we kind of worked our way up through these different levels of consciousness. And I think it's coming back around in the form of organizational purpose and individual purpose and conscious capitalism and these sorts of movements where people are sort of rediscovering the idea that work can be noble and companies can contribute to a better world, and it doesn't need to be all just based on pure selfishness and assume that it'll all work out for the best.
Yeah, well, definitely hope so.
I will say, along the lines of what Rachel's saying, that government as an institution is deeply wounded and dysfunctional, right? As not psychologically healthy. Business as an institution has its flaws, but it's much more functional and much psychologically healthier than government. So if they were both people, you'd have more fun hanging out with business than hanging out with government.
Yeah, I would say so. Any questions on your end, Vance, or from the audience?
Well, this would be a little bit of a shift of gears, but Jeremy L, hope you're still around, Jeremy, but it's a good question. He's asking about the guided meditations and the guided hypnosis that you find on YouTube videos. What are the pros and cons of those? And can those videos damage normal
I'm sorry, what kind of videos again? I missed one word in
on
there.
the other hand.
Oh,
meditation, hypnosis.
I think it's hard to do harm with that kind of stuff. I mean, I suppose someone could maliciously put subliminal stuff like, send me Bitcoin or something and something like that. But that kind of stuff doesn't work that well. That's why companies gave up on subliminal advertising. Really blunt advertising turns out to work much better. So I don't know if that stuff's damaged. I mean, I think, try it. I have a friend in Israel, a guy named Doron Libstein, whose company basically sells meditations. And so you can go buy meditations from, it's called a Mentors Channel. You can buy meditations from different teachers and stuff like that. And it's a lot of really cool stuff. And so you have to kind of find what floats your boat. And part of the problem with that what I call the transformation industry, where people are selling transformation-based services and products, is it's really vast and complex and contains all sorts of stuff, and it's very difficult to figure out which piece is actually going to work for you as an individual based on where you are in your own journey. Because all the pitches basically say, well, no matter who you are, no matter what's going on for you, this is exactly the right thing for you, and they all say that. So it's difficult. Like in a college, you can go to the guidance counselor and get help picking a major or knowing which courses to take, and it's hard to find that guidance counselor function. So I don't think any of it's actively harmful, unless it's giving you negative messages about yourself or about parts of yourself. Yeah.
How about you, Rachel? What do you think about it?
I'm such a fan of this framework that Tim has for finding purpose. And I guess that's where I like to park my energies and my time. It might be worth us talking about that framework. I feel like just hearing about it kind of lights people up in terms of.
Let's do it. Yeah, definitely.
Want to? Well, there's several parts, and the first part you find out about is called essence. And I'll just lead off here, Tim, and then you can.
Are you just going to lob it over to me? Nicely done. What Rachel's talking about is in the system I created, there are 4 different types of purpose statements that you can find. And these are difficult to do using the indirect sort of connect the dots method. It's much easier when you go into the unconscious, then you're more likely to get all 4. So essence is a state of being. So when I'm being my purpose, what am I being? When you're being your purpose, what are you being? Well, when you're being your purpose, you're being something different than when I'm being my purpose, because we're not the same person. Right? So we're all
So what walks in
being something unique. What's that?
it's also what walks in the room when you walk in the room, and
That's right.
when you leave.
That's right. When you show up, everyone in the room suddenly gets bathed in your essence,
Right.
completely invisible to you because it's always there for you. But now we all get a big dose of your essence when you walk in the room. So
And
other people are way better judges of it than you are. Go ahead, Rachel.
And it's what we miss when you're not there, when you're not around.
We're deprived of your essence when you're not here.
Man, would you like me to read my essence statement?
Oh, I would be so delighted, Rachel. I would.
Well, it's the same for all time from the first.
That's okay. I would still be delighted to hear it again.
I am the life that is really life. That's my essence statement.
Indeed,
so
you are.
Do
you want to hear mine, Rachel? It's probably changed since you last heard.
Yeah.
I am the herald of the realization of heaven on earth.
Wow. I like that.
I'm here to announce, you'll all be pleased to know. Good. So that's essence. Blessing, the second aspect, is what you do when you're doing your purpose, right? There's being and there's doing. So the essence is what you be when you're being your purpose. The doing is what you do when you're doing your purpose. So when you're doing your purpose, you're doing something different than when I'm doing my purpose. It's a repeatable process, usually involves other people, like I do my blessing to you, I bless you. And it changes you in some way when I do it. So maybe it connects you to your divinity, or it heals your wounds, or it shows you your true self, or it, shows you the path to bliss. Who knows what, right? It could be anything, but it's something I do to you that moves you in some transformational direction. Rachel, want to read yours?
Yeah. So blessing is to help people take hold of the life that is really life. And I do this by walking in the room and noticing the people. And I can sort of tell the intuitives from the non-intuitives. And my purpose is to help primarily intuitives. And then I engage them in what matters most and talk to them about the life that's really life and help them become sustainable and self-sufficient in their quest.
There you go. And mine is to lead people to heaven on earth. That's my blessing.
Yeah.
And typically I do that with leaders who are trying to change the world and are frustrated. I was just talking to one today. He's like, Tim, I'm so frustrated. It's not changing fast enough. And I said, yes, well, the good news is that you're exactly the person I've been put on this planet to help.
You're at the right place at the right time.
Right.
So we are
That's
here.
the good news.
Yeah.
And then the third is mission, which is just what it sounds like, right? Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to change the world in the following way. So that could be save the whales, feed the starving children, raise human consciousness, and climate change, whatever. Rachel?
Yeah, I've got several missions. One is to usher in an alternative to hierarchy. That's the collaborative operating system. And that includes educating people on the dangers and dysfunction of some hierarchical systems. Another is to call forth and train agents of change. And another is to authorize, bless, and serve those who are called to cross the threshold into consciousness, into red pill and becoming awake. I want to add another one though, Tim. What I want to add is I want to raise hell with the vainglorious megalomaniacs running our country.
I'm with you.
I believe you, Rachel. I believe that you want to do that. Need to go check with your sources and see if that's really a mission.
No, I just want to do it.
Okay, all right. Well, then I think you should indulge yourself. Own it as a personal desire and knock yourself out.
Right.
Don't need anybody's permission. So my mission is to reveal and create heaven on earth. Right? And the reveal part's important. Because if you just say create heaven on earth, it implies that there's no heaven on earth present currently, which is not true. There's lots of heaven on earth here currently. As we said earlier, we're just not seeing it because we're focused on the negative. We don't have to change everything. We only have to change some of it.
Straight out of the Gospel of Thomas. The kingdom is all around and men do not see it. So I love it.
And you split a piece of wood, and I am there.
Yeah. Well, right now, baby Jesus is in the barn with Rachel. So
There you go. And then the last aspect of purpose is message. What were you put on this earth to communicate to others? What wisdom do you have to share with the world? Rachel?
Well, one of my newer messages is that humanity is crossing a threshold together.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness is our superpower. It will take all we have, and we have all that it takes.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Mine's interestingly similar, which I didn't realize until this moment.
Yeah.
The time to create heaven on earth is now. We have everything we need to create it. In fact, we have exactly what we need to create it, and trying to get rid of anything will slow the process down or make it fail.
Yes. Very good. Very good.
Beautiful.
So ideally, if you go poking around the unconscious, you would wind up with all four of those, in essence: a blessing, a mission, and a message. Usually not on the first pass. It takes time to get them all. Rachel and I have been at this for a while. But first time you might get one or two, right? And the idea is you have to create enough safety that you can go in and ask whatever it seems like in your belief system ought to know the answer. Your higher self, or your self with a capital S, or your inner light, or your soul, or your heart, or your gut, or your intuition, or your dead grandma, or your guardian angel, or God, or the Force, or Buddha, Allah, whatever. Doesn't matter. It's up to you to pick an agency that in your belief system, internal or external, that ought to know your purpose. And then the idea is you want to get two-way communication working with it, so you can ask and it can answer. What's my essence? What's my blessing? What's my mission? What's my message?
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And how did you come up with it? Trial and error?
Download, spontaneous revelation. Most people don't know the real meaning of the word apocalypse, but I bet you know, Miguel.
Yeah,
Any good Gnostic knows that apocalypse is a synonym for revelation.
Yes.
And when people say, oh no, it's the apocalypse, you're actually saying, oh no, I'm about to get hidden knowledge revealed to me. Yes. That's what that sentence actually means, which isn't really something you need to avoid necessarily. When people talk about like the world ending and everything, they're talking about a specific apocalypse. That was the revelation or apocalypse, synonyms to John. And so we get all of our stuff about the seals and the 666 and the 4 horsemen, all that, from a particular revelation of secret knowledge. That's what apocalypse means. So it was an apocalypse, Miguel, a revelation. I found my purpose and the true purpose methodology and my first mission all at the same time within a couple of minutes. And I learned that I was here to help other people find their purpose. And at that time, my mission was to transform business from a profit-driven activity to a purpose-driven activity. That was the mission I was given, along with the knowledge of how to find people's purpose. And I was like, oh, okay. I can do that.
Wonderful. And I guess it should be mentioned, it doesn't have to be, not everybody has to save the whale or anything like that. Some people could be, I just want to be the coach of 10-year-old boys.
Well, this is where the blessing comes in. You do your purpose to one person, and then you do your purpose to one other person. And every time you do that, you're saving the world. And your mission may not be global. It may be to end gang violence in your city or heal your family or something. I had one person recently in a workshop whose mission was her trusted source told her, heal yourself. That's your mission. When you're done with that, we can talk about other things. But for now, that's your mission. Heal yourself. It's like, cool, right? Mission has to have an endpoint, right? Mission accomplished. That has an endpoint. It qualifies. Check. We're good.
And your book obviously offers different techniques.
It does. Gets into this in a lot of detail.
Something that that works for everybody. You can find the right fit for you to be able to.
That's right. There's lots of different techniques. They don't all work for everybody. And there's a whole thing that I didn't really get into, which is the reason most people can't do two-way communication with the universe or their higher self or whatever, is they've got fears in the way. And until you can clear those fears out of the way, that phone is just gonna, it's just not really gonna work. And so the whole first part of the book is devoted to, what do you do with those fears? What do you do with the parts of you that don't want you to know your purpose and don't want you to be able to talk to your true self? Like, how do you deal with that so that you can get it all to work? Because you can't just kind of Nike, just do it, right? That doesn't work. You have to actually sit down and deal with that stuff and get it out of the way so the channel is clear, because the frightened voices in your head are louder than the ones that know your purpose.
Well, I guess that's the $64,000 question. I keep dating myself. Everybody said there must be another more modern term, but it just works. But
It sounds current to me. I think
really,
we're in the same generation, so it didn't cause any disturbance in my force at all. So
yeah, well, those millennials are abandoning us by the droves because we're so square. I just said square. Anyway, that's another. I just dated myself, but fear. That's it. That's really from Dune. Fear is the mind killer. Tim,
Yep.
how would you define fear? Most people think fear is simply, I'm avoiding pain, so that's good.
Well, there's a great line from an otherwise terrible movie with Will Smith. What was it called? Where they're on After Earth or something like that. I can't remember. It was him and his son on this fighting
Great
these
speech.
creatures that can smell fear and all this kind of thing. Anyway, he said that risk is real, fear is a choice. And I thought, oh, that's good. I like that. Good distinction, right? There is real danger in the world. Fear is an emotional state in response to usually perceived danger, not actual danger. Most fear is in response to an internal self-constructed scenario of something that might go wrong in the future. The vast majority of fear falls in that category. There can be reason to have concern about things that might go wrong, but being in a state of fear does not, except in very rare circumstances, equip one to deal with them well. The way the brain works is when you go, oh no, X bad thing might happen, this tiny little thing called the amygdala takes over. And it is not a long-term strategic thinker and problem solver, right? It is a run from the lion thing. Now, if there's an actual lion there, this is life-saving, right? It will get you moving immediately and it might save your life. But if the threat is a possible market downturn or an upset spouse, it's not effective at all, right? Or potentially being laid off at work. It's not effective at all. Those are complicated relationship problems or strategic problems that require cerebral cortex thinking. And the first thing the amygdala does is shut off the cerebral cortex, then starts taking action, right? So being in a state of fear generally equips you poorly to deal with complex, changing, risk-filled situations. So learning to manage fear is very important, right? So in the true purpose process, a lot of the time and energy, in fact, much, if not most of the time and energy, goes in teaching people how to envision the way of dealing with risk in a positive rather than negative frame. Rather than saying, oh no, I might not have enough money, it's actually better to say, I need at least this much money, right? And even better to say, I'm earning at least this much money, even if you're currently not. So you know that you're not, right? It's not like you're deluding yourself that you're earning this money, but you're framing it as a goal rather than a threat. And if you frame it as a goal, then the problem solving part of your brain kicks in to try to figure out how to get that to happen, instead of the fear part that wants to run away and won't be able to increase your income because it's just going to run away, or attack, which won't increase your income either. So there's tricks we play with the brain so that the person's in a state of calm as they envision the future, as they ask about their purpose, as they strategize how to manifest their purpose. Even though there's risk in all of those things, being in a state of fear doesn't make you more able to deal with that risk.
And does this include you talk about the future again, Will Smith telling Qatar danger is real, but fear is a choice. It is near insanity. He's 100% right. Fear is near insanity, or it is insanity. Well, what about going to the past? You had to go face, your dad
Mhm.
telling you don't know enough. I'm sure it's
Mhm.
afraid to go inward to the
Very
past.
frightening. The
Very
whole
frightening.
psyche wants to go the other direction, not that way, like I said before.
But
So it's
it's saying,
going
I want to avoid this pain.
directly
Don't take me.
upstream.
Don't take. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
So,
very unpleasant, very frightening. And I was just talking with a client earlier today. He's a guy who works in a Dutch company, and his bias, as many people in the spiritual kind of community are, is towards the future and towards the positive, right?
mhm,
And he's like, well, why would I want to go back and deal with unpleasant memories? And the answer is because they're unconsciously dragging you down all the time. So if you actually go back and deal with it and spend, minutes, hours, or days dealing with the unpleasant past, and then it frees you from dragging it around, that's time well spent,
Mhm.
as opposed to continually trying to suppress it and pretend it's not there and then dragging it along with you like a ball and chain, which is what it's called a spiritual bypass. Like everything's fine, right? I'm happy. I'm good. I'm only thinking about the future. I'm not thinking about all the horrible things that happened in my childhood, right? It's like, well, okay, you're not thinking about it consciously, but some disowned parts of you are thinking about it all the time, and they are
mm,
creating noise and dragging the system. I guarantee it.
and it
So,
affects your
so
health,
it's
everything.
not to go in and wallow in it. It's to go in and transform it and heal it and redeem it, so that it's no longer a weight. It still happened, but I don't have to be oppressed by it. So I have to face the fear of going into this dark material, this unconscious stuff. And then when I do, I am freed from it forever.
Yeah,
Rachel, your thoughts on that?
Rachel. Yeah.
No, I don't have anything to add to that. Sorry.
She's just smiling and looking happy in agreement.
This is one example where self hypnosis or meditation, or whatever, it can be a tool for avoidance, to do the spiritual bypassing and
Mhm.
not face the issues because they're uncomfortable. Oh, I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to meditate. So you put yourself to sleep. Now, that's not to say meditation's not a great thing, but it's got to be used like any tool when it's appropriate.
That's right. So with a hammer, you can, drive nails and make a temple. You can hit yourself in the thumb and cause yourself pain, or you can bang someone's skull in with it and kill them, right? It's the same tool either way. So the question is, what's your intent and how are you using meditation? So meditation's a wonderful thing, strongly recommended. It actually stimulates the opposite of the stress response, like the hypothalamus. It just calms everything down, and you tend to live longer, lower blood pressure, all kinds of benefits from meditation. And if you're doing it as a strategy for avoiding negative feelings, then it's a spiritual bypass. And so, my feeling is do all of it, right? Do the meditation, find your purpose, explore the wounds from the past enough to be free of them so you can move towards your purpose. Most people, when they aggressively start to manifest their purpose, they start tripping over their childhood wounds. That's what typically happens.
Mm,
That the original patterns that got created now start to interfere. Now, they were survival patterns and they caused you to survive, right? So they worked. But now they start to interfere in the forward progress and evolution. And so that's when you realize you have to, okay, now I have to turn backwards and deal with this stuff in order to move forwards. Otherwise, it's going to keep impeding me on the path.
Right. What saved you in the first half of life will impede you or destroy you in the second half of life.
Yeah.
very, very interesting. And when in the Course in Miracles, everything we do when we're angry, upset is projection. Do you go
Mhm.
this far, Tim? That
Absolutely.
every time I'm upset, even in Alcoholics Anonymous, it was taught me every time I'm upset is because there's something wrong with me. It became something we have to hammer it into
Well,
our head.
I wouldn't go with the something wrong with. I would say anytime I'm upset, I am projecting. If I'm really upset at another person or an event or something like that, then I am seeing a reflection of some unresolved aspect of my unconscious. Interestingly, when you're in a really positive reaction, the same is true. If you're adoring someone or looking up to someone or feeling like, oh my God, she's so great, I could never be like her, when you're doing that, you're actually doing the exact same thing. Now you're out projecting a positive aspect to your unconscious rather than negative. And positive and negative, not in terms of one's good or bad or right or wrong, positive or negative in terms of how you react to them, right? And either way, it's just more unconscious material being sort of projected over reality for you to get to see yourself. But it looks like, it's kind of like watching a movie, right? Where what you're really looking at is a piece of reflective fabric. That's what you're looking at. But you don't see the piece of reflective fabric. You're not paying attention to that. You're paying attention to the light bouncing off of it. But that light's coming from behind you. It's not actually in front of you, right? So it's the same thing. When you look at reality and you're upset, the person standing in front of you is actually a piece of reflective fabric. And what you're seeing is something that from your own past that's being broadcast and reflecting off of them and back to you. And so it's not a current time event. It's an emotional reaction to a past time event being brought forward into present time. And that means there's an opportunity for healing and for claiming and redeeming some aspect of your unconscious and some aspect of your past. But in the moment when you're having a reaction, that's not what you're thinking. You're not thinking, I wonder in what way some aspect of my past is being reflected to me. But you're thinking, this bitch needs to die, right? I mean, that's what you're thinking. It's like, wow! Like, and you're sure of it.
You're creating a fiction. You are so beautiful. Or even when people are complaining about Trump or Biden, it's like, man, you are
Trump is a fabulous projection screen for everybody,
He's
right?
The best.
The people on the right are all like, adoring and seeing him as the savior and all this kind of stuff. And the people on the left are like, oh my God, this is the Antichrist made flesh. They're both just projecting.
But don't tell them that, because then you get screamed at. It's like,
then they'll start projecting on you.
Yeah.
The good news about me, and Rachel can confirm this too, is I'm sufficiently impersonal that if people project really awful stuff on me, I don't mind that much.
Is there a way you can defend against people projecting on you?
Absolutely not. Everyone's projecting on you all the time. There's
no
nothing you can do.
Word or uncle, nothing.
No. And saying, oh, by the way, what you're doing is really projecting on me, it has nothing to do with me, doesn't help at all.
No. With my wife, it never helps. And sometimes I say it just as some sort of defense. I don't even mean it. I'm like, you're projecting, and I know it's 100% my fault. But
right. Yeah.
Gotta get out of this argument some way or another.
That's the new age defense. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, people who are really psychologically aware, the arguments sound different. So
this is great. All right, well, as we're getting towards the end, any last questions from you, Vance, or the audience that you see?
Well, we had one a long time ago. Because we've been talking a lot about how we go inward, what practical examples, Rachel and Tim, what methods do you recommend for going within,
Tim?
Sure. So one of my favorites, one of the really simplest one that's a very good general purpose useful tool is something called active imagination. And it was created by Carl Jung, our buddy. And there's many different forms of it, but the form I find that's most accessible to beginners is the written form. And so you decide that you want to explore something internal, right? Now, it could be like I said before, that, in there somewhere is a wounded child who remembers vividly what your core wound was and what happened and what you felt at the time, even though you've suppressed all that stuff. Right? There's a part of you that knows, doesn't even have to think about it. So if you wanted to explore that, you could have a dialogue with your wounded child. If you wanted to find your purpose, you would have a dialogue with your higher self or God or your, true self or the universe or whatever made sense to you, right? Grandma, dead grandma. It could be anything, just something that to you seems like it ought to know your purpose, internal or external, my heart, my intuition, external, my spirit guide, whatever. So you pick something like that, And then you would be able to interview it about your purpose, right? Or maybe there's some pattern you notice yourself doing and you want to talk to the part of you that's the author, the creator of that pattern. I notice I'm always picking the same kind of men. No matter how much I try to do something different, it always turns out to be the same damn guy every time. Who's in there making these choices? Who's picking? So whatever part of you want to talk to, what you do is you write out a dialogue with it. So I would write Tim : hey, I want to talk to the part of me that chooses my mates, my partners, right? Part : I don't know which part it is yet. Oh yeah, that's me. Tim : what should I call you? Part : call me partner picker. Tim : okay, partner picker. What criteria are you using to pick partners? Partner picker: well, you'll be surprised to know that Tim : well, that sure explains a lot, right? So, so you can do it on a computer, like in a Word doc, or you can do it with a pen on a piece of paper, but you have to put names, who's talking, in front of each line. That's the critical part right there. That's the essential piece. If you're not doing that, you're doing a different exercise. So it looks like a screenplay or an SMS chat. Name, sentence, name, sentence, name, sentence, like that. And you can use that to talk to anything. And it works great. And it usually works on the first try, right? Some things are harder to talk to than others, but 90% of the time, you'll just get what you're going for right away. So that's a really, really good general purpose self-exploration tool that's super easy to use. Usually it works so well that people get intimidated and stop using it, is my experience. And they're like, oh boy, that worked a little too well. I'm going to go over here and watch TV now.
Well, suppose you feel sad, suppose you feel sad during the holidays. Miguel mentioned at the beginning that, we were hoping to help people with that. I'm sad, I don't feel good in Christmas, blah, 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 blah. Who would you talk to? Who would
this happened with a client today. He said, Tim, I've been really depressed. I've been even having like mild suicidal thoughts and stuff. And I said, okay, let's find out which part that is.
Yes.
And so who in there, so he writes his name, John : I want to talk to the part of me that's generating the suicidal thoughts. Part : that's me. John : so what's that about, right? As it turned out, what was going on was the part was trying to warn him when he was off track. And the way it would do that was by sending depressive emotions. And the more off track you get, the more depressive emotions it would send. It's like, I'm not trying to stop him, the part says. It's just a signal. I don't want him to like crawl into bed for a week. I want him to do something about the problem. This is how I communicate. This is how I send signals. It was very helpful for him to understand that. Now he knows, oh, when I'm feeling this way, that's a signal from this part. Something's off. What is it?
So the name was a long name. The part that was
it said I actually talked to it and I asked it, well, what would you like to be called? I gave it some ideas. It said, call me Depression. It said Depression's a good name.
Okay.
So now he knows to talk to the part of him when he feels that. It's like, go to the part called Depression and say, John : hey, Depression, I'm feeling you. What are you signaling about? What's the issue? Depression : well, this thing at work where that's a real problem and you've been ignoring. You need to focus on that. John : great, I'm on it. Thanks. Right. And now he can go deal with the actual issue, and then the feeling just serves as a signal. That's how it worked in him. I have no idea how it will work in you. Right? That's for you to figure out. But that's the method to go in and look for and talk to instead of speculating about. Talk to the one actually creating the phenomenon and find out what its motive is.
Well, that's wonderful.
Very good.
What about you, Rachel? Any techniques you want to share?
Well, I love active imagination for all the reasons Tim said. Dream work is also wonderful, but it takes
complicated.
complicated.
Interpreting.
But our dreams are showing us at all times where we are in our hero's journey, where we are with respect to our purpose. And they're showing us the next step. So once you learn to decipher this, you can get a snapshot or several every morning when you wake up.
Well, and you can use active imagination with your dream. This is what you were talking about at the very beginning, Miguel, right? So let's say I have a dream, and in the dream, I had one, a female submarine captain, short, blonde. Like, okay, what's this? And I did 23 years in the Navy, so submarine captain's not that far off, right? Right. So I had a submarine repair unit that I was the commanding officer of. But this is a dream symbol, this short, blonde submarine captain, right? So what I did was I sat down, Tim colon, Captain colon, right? So now I say, okay, hey there, hun, like what are you doing in my dream? Right? This is the question. What do you represent? What are you trying to communicate? So that's something anyone can do. Rachel and I are trained in much more sophisticated methods of dream interpretation, but that would be enough to get started, right? If you have a dream that really strikes you or is very memorable or has strong feelings associated with it, start interviewing the different characters from the dream and find out what they're up to.
Yeah, that's something I've done. I started dream interpretation a couple of years ago, and at first I would tell the audience, don't put too much pressure on yourself. If you're having a dialogue with the psyche, it's all going to work out. I used to think I got to be like Tony Soprano and have this vivid dream and perfect. Now I realize if I'm having a dialogue with the psyche, that right there is half the battle. Yep. And like Jung said, is you don't have to interpret your symbols and images. You experience them. Let them flow through you, and everything will work out. So, yeah, whether I'm doing dream interpretation or the I Ching or all these tools to really give a voice to my unconscious is
right.
I think.
And so, two quick comments. So, DF says, "Aren't they all aspects of yourself?" Answer, yes. Everything in a dream represents you. It may also represent other things at the same time, but it definitely represents a part of yourself and may also represent something else. So if you have your kid in your dream or your spouse in your dream or your parents in your dream, they're still representing parts of you. They may also represent something external. And someone said active imagination seems to require clairvoyant abilities. Not at all. Try it. People think, well, I won't know what to write. Nah, just try it. You'd be surprised at how well it works. People are like, but do I have to do this? Do I have to be in a certain state? I'm like, no. Shut up. Start writing. It works surprisingly well with little or no preparation or training.
Awesome. And Vance, do you want to offer some tools that have worked out for you recently? Anything you'd like to share?
Well, one form of meditation that I've been using recently, and I just started up, is the I Ching, because I'll cast it and it tells me something, and I think about it. It puts me into a meditative type of state where I think about the situation I ask about, and then I think about the hexagram's meaning, and that's that's the other thing I do. If something's really bothering me and I don't want it to tell it to shut up, I do that, and that actually works. If it's because I know if some horrible thing that I'm projecting, well, what if this, what if that, and so I realize that these are things that I am just imagining that will that might happen, and I'm not doing anything positive to avoid it. I'm just wallowing in it. So I said, all right, shut up. All right. And it goes away, sometimes it doesn't, in which case I know I have to do something pretty soon. Those are just a couple of the things.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Well, awesome. We are at the end. I should have said at the beginning, the audio version will come out in a couple of days on iTunes, iHeartRadio, all that. Incredible conversation. I hope it's helped. This show the audio version will be complete. It'll be free on Patreon. You won't have to subscribe. I'm just going to give it out. It's sort of a Christmas holiday gift. And what our wonderful guests, I think it is a great gift, especially in these dark times, and I hope it does help. But for more help, Tim, could you tell the audience where to find out more about you and your work, where to purchase your book and all that?
Yeah, so you can either go to, if you want to work with me directly, it would be newparadigmgloballeader.com. Newparadigmgloballeader.com. And then if you're really interested in the True Purpose process, then it would be truepurposeinstitute.com. And you can buy the book there. You can also get it on Amazon. There it is, True
There it
Purpose.
is.
You can you can get it at truepurposeinstitute.com. You can also find coaches who can help you find your purpose, who are trained in the methodology. They're really, really skillful. We have a very, very rigorous certification program. Yeah, so and whether you want help from me or not, like go for it. Go along the path. Take the next step. Use the active imagination. Talk to some part of yourself. Ask it about your purpose. Go do something. Take something from this call, and don't let it just be a neat thing you listen to. Do something with it.
Yes, you matter. You do have a purpose, and you have so much to offer to the world, each one of us. That is a cosmic law. I promise you. Don't go away. Don't sell yourself short. So, Rachel, anything you want to offer about where to find you or anything else before we say buenas noches?
I just want to underscore our time today and just say, all psychic health depends upon the strength of that connection with our mighty self. And this is an action-packed and high adventure approach to a very strong connection. And it's a very powerful way to live your life. You'll look back every 6 months and you won't know who you were 6 months ago.
It's a good thing.
Mhm.
Well, awesome. Well, Rachel, thank you very much for coming again. Always awesome talking to you. That
Mm.
we email each other enough, but it's always nice talking to you.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you, Moondog, too.
no, of course, couldn't do it without Vance and Tim. It has truly been an honor and a pleasure having you on Aeon Byte, and appreciate everything you've done, everything you've shared, and appreciate your time.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And according to the chat, apparently now I'm an honorary Gnostoid. I'm not quite sure what that is, but
Yeah, we'll get you
but I'm
initiated.
honored to be one. So
Awesome. Awesome. And last but never least, Vance, thanks very much for coming here and keeping us company and keeping the wonderful audience in the chat room happy and served and all that.
I try, and it's my pleasure to be here, as I always say, and I just love hanging out with everybody that we have coming around into the Aeon Byte tent.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, audience, really love seeing you in the chat room. Great questions. I hope this has helped. We are just getting started. There is so much to learn, so much to find out who our true selves. And it is, as Rachel says, it's the greatest adventure of a lifetime. And it can be an amazing adventure. Can be hard, can be painful, but hey, that's what heroes do. Simple as that. It wasn't easy for Jesus, wasn't easy for Buddha or Muhammad or any. So why should it be easy for us? It's simple as that. So anyway, thank you very much for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real. Happy holiday, solstice, or whatever you celebrate. And we will talk to each other soon. Hello and goodbye as always.